Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So today I want to start the show with another lesson, and I'm going to focus in on ADX. And I want to kind of cover a couple of things that I haven't really touched on yet. So let's go ahead and get into this agenda. So in terms of the keys to this indicator, I do want to focus in on the fact that there are two ways to that I see two really strong ways to use ADX that are very specific. And I'm going to go through those clear strategies. All right. But we also, in a part of those strategies, we want to focus in on whether the ADX, the level of the ADX, what percentage is it at right now, and also whether it's rising or falling. All right. I think a lot of people get a little confused. And I have some questions on this on a regular basis. So I wanted to make sure I covered this in detail. So let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. Okay, I've got the chart of CCJ up, and I've got all four time frames, but I want to focus in on the weekly chart. Okay, and let's actually zero in on this. And what I want to talk about is when this was actually breaking out of this triangular formation here, really call it an ascending triangle. We had a low ADX condition in place. All right. That means that we went sideways and formed a pattern long enough to keep the ADX below 25 for an extended period of time. In this case, it actually was from the middle of April until the middle of almost like early May. So we're talking about a little over a year where the ADX stayed low. And during that time, and very importantly, we went through a consolidation phase that created, if we draw trend lines on price, we had a formation. So the first thing we want to recognize is that there's two strategies we want to use with ADX. All right. One is when ADX is low for an extended period of time, we want to draw trend lines on price and look to buy a breakout. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to automatically buy the moment it breaks the trend line, but that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to be a buyer on a trend line break after an extended period of low ADX. All right. Now, in this case, because it made a pretty decent sized move to actually break out here, you could have been looking for a minor little pause. But the point I want to make is that we had this pause, but if you look at how strong a move this was to the upside, when we get any kind of like a gap formation or a really powerful breakout play, I don't typically expect a pullback all the way to the 18. Okay, I'm looking for a pullback back to the breakout area as opposed to a pullback to the 18. You see how there's some space here? Now, this is early in the trend, and it's a breakout after a low ADX condition. So I think it's pretty low risk, even though you're not getting it right at the 18. It doesn't hurt that we actually have a pinch play forming on the MACD. But I want to focus in on the fact that this ADX line stayed rising throughout this whole pause phase. I'd call it a pause because the ADX is rising and it never turned down. If the ADX actually turns down, then I view it more like a consolidation, correction, pullback phase. This is more of just a minor pause in the trend after breaking out. All right. You need to recognize this because when this ADX line is rising, you don't have to get these deep pullbacks. You really just want to look for pullbacks towards the breakout area. Now, it gets a little tricky when you're looking at a daily chart and you're extended on the weekly, right? And you're getting the same pattern developing, and you're extended on the next higher time frame. Then it gets a little trickier. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you're breaking out of a base, out of a low ADX condition, a lot of times you want to get a pullback back to the 18, but you're not going to get it. Okay. You need to recognize when there's a lot of strength to a breakout, especially if there's a gap involved, and know that most cases, you're not going to get an opportunity right back at the moving average. All right. So the key thing to keep in mind is strategy one is we want to buy the breakout. All right. We're buying the breakout of a low ADX condition. All right. Even though the ADX was rising here, it really was just crossing 25. It's not like we had this strong ADX and we were buying a pullback. We were actually buying a minor pause just because it broke out from an overbought condition. All right. Now, look at what took place after that. We made this big run to the upside. Look at what the ADX does. You see how powerful a move this is? This is really strong. This is telling us we have very, very strong momentum condition in place. The likelihood of this just falling apart with this kind of momentum is really, really small. We should be looking for trade type 2. Okay, trade type 2 is to look to buy a pullback. That's pullback. All right, that's what we're looking to do here, is buy a pullback. So first is the breakout. That's with the low ADX pattern. All right, we get a low ADX condition. We want to buy breakouts. Once the ADX is strong, we want to look to play pullbacks. Now, I want to show the difference between the rising line, which is here, and now we're getting a pullback and the line has turned down. Now, there's a couple things I think you need to keep in mind. Pullbacks or turn downs in these lines are not all created equal. If you reach 50 or you're up in this 50 area, all right, and you turn down, then and you get MACD extended above the 0 line, then I'm thinking this is probably just not going to be a simple pullback. We're going to go through some type of a consolidation phase. It's possible we'll even break the 18 on this time frame, but I'm not typically thinking I want to buy a quick pullback and look for a trade right away like I am here. You see how this is the breakout of this pattern? It's early. It hasn't moved yet. We have a low ADX condition. I can buy at the breakout point. I probably didn't even have to wait for the minor little pause, but obviously after a big move, you kind of want to do that. In this case, we're getting a pullback, and it's a pretty strong pullback. I mean, it's dropped from 42 down to 35 in a pretty short period of time. So a lot of people like to dive in and jump on board. It looks like it's forming another pinch here. The problem I've got is, again, this has made a pretty substantial move. This has made a pretty substantial move. I'm more inclined to believe that this is going to consolidate for a bit. I'm not necessarily looking to play the pullback. So this line has turned down, but it's at 48. This line was rising and it was at 25. Maybe by that time it was around 27. All right. So in this case, even though the ADX was much lower, I like this one because it's rising. See what I mean? Now, in this area here, where we've got a rising ADX up in the 30s, 40s, or whatever, and it hasn't turned down yet, you can go down to the smaller time frame, maybe not the daily, maybe even the hourly, and look to play little trades to the upside just because this is such a strong and powerful trend. But you have to be kind of nimble because you need a pullback on the daily to get a really good setup. We're getting that to take place because this pullback here is causing a pretty strong pullback on the daily chart. The problem is, as you can see, the way this is taking place, the 18 is just rolling over. We don't really have any kind of setup in place. MACD is getting close to the 0 line, but the ADX is not low yet, and red DI is showing some sellers here. One other thing I want to point out is that when we get this pattern where the ADX is rising here, all right, we break out, we get this little pause, and the ADX stays rising. On the smaller time frame, you're almost always going to get a trigger one, all right? And I want to make sure anyone who's taken my course, this is right out of my course, if you have a strong ADX condition on the higher time frame where it's rising, all right, and you get a pullback that doesn't cause this to roll over, look for a trigger one here. And we want to take the trend line break as an operative signal. So I just wanted to make sure I covered this and showed you the different ways. First, we want to buy breakouts when we're in a low ADX condition. Then we want to look to buy pullbacks in a strong ADX condition. However, we have to recognize the level of the ADX and how extended it is, especially using the MACD as a supplemental tool. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and also subscribe. So my research can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. The individual package has about 2 to 3 reports each week, plus a special video for that package. However, if you're interested in just learning more about my approach I think a great way to get started is the book. I've got it in a PDF format at a discount right now. So you can go to rabelstockresearch.com/book and check that out. All right, let's go ahead and get into the symbols. Okay, so I got a lot of symbols that came through, but I do want to cover the QQQ and the IWM. I am going to look at gold as well, and then we'll go through some symbol requests. Now, I do want to provide a couple of quick trade setups that took place in the QQQ and the IWM as well. All right, so one thing I wanted to focus in on is what's taking place on the monthly chart of the QQQ. You see how we had this big move to the upside, and now we're going through this consolidation. It really does look kind of like a bull flag when you look at it in these terms. Strong move to the upside, kind of forming a flag here in the form of a pinch play, right? Switching over into October was a big deal because we formed two lower highs, and now this has the ability to form a or to trigger as a pinch. We're up into these highs here. I would actually prefer if it doesn't trigger and it goes a little bit longer, even a month or two consolidating while this cups around a little bit more. But we have to take it as it comes here to see what the market offers. This doesn't really look like it's ready to go yet. I think this wants to spend a little bit more time consolidating. There's a strong momentum condition on the weekly chart. This is bullish. All right. We don't really have red taking over. It turned down when they kissed. So green is still on top, and the sellers are well below 25. They're just not that strong right now. So we've got an upward bias. What I'd like to see is this hold on a pullback, hold the 18 and turn back up. I think that would be a really encouraging sign that we've got something maybe a little bit more imminent in place. All right, let's just look at this. So if you look at what took place on the daily chart, it looks pretty innocent, but we had an undercut pattern. Undercut, rallied up, and then tested the breakdown point again. So that's an undercut and rally. And then if you go to the hourly, undercut and rally pattern, and then you go to the hourly and look at what happened. We had this big green bar, but then look at the pinch play that developed with green DI associated with it, and then we had a nice trading play, right? So these things are happening all the time, and it doesn't look like anything's really taking place. We're really just trading in a range here right now, probably between like 355 up to 380 potentially, something like that, 375. And I don't even know if we'll make it to 375 before pulling back. All right, let's look at the IWM. Much weaker market, but it was a trade setup that took place here if you were nimble. So I've been talking about how weak this is, but also talking about how much support we have here. And what I like to do, and I'm going to zero in on this real quick. So when we're coming into price support, I'm looking to see if we have MACD support or ADX support, but I like to use MACD for this. Do you see how the MACD, it looks like it's crossing down through the zero line, but the signal line is above. I consider this MACD support. All right. Now, a lot of times it'll come down to the zero line and start to curve here like that. And I would say that's also support. But this to me is supporting the evidence of what's taking place here. Now, it's not that strong yet. It hasn't started to turn yet. We haven't seen a histogram improve. We'd like to see the bar, the histogram bar show some sign of improvement as well. But we're in the area of support. It's not like you can buy off of this, but you can use this to your advantage. Now, if we look at, I want you to show you this one thing. So we've got support here. We're stretched away on this time frame. We're stretched away from the zero line on this time frame. You see that? And then on this time frame, we cross the zero line with a pinch play. You see the combination? I want you to mark this down. Coming into support on the high time frame. All right, we're near the zero line. Or we could be stretched to the downside. But in this case, we're coming into the zero line. On this one, we're stretched to the downside. And then on this time frame, we get our signal to the upside. Now, the move is only to a rally to the 18-day. Do you see how that was the target? So that's basically all we got. You would have had one leg to the upside. That was the trade. All right, there's not a whole lot going on with this. We're still not seeing any improvement. Look at the relative strength hitting another new low. We have to see improvement in this before we can expect anything really meaningful to the upside. Okay, let's look at GLD. A little bit of a disappointing couple weeks for this because this was pulling back in a pretty orderly way. You see how this was pulling back here? It actually formed a pinch. And then look at the knife down on this big red bar here. All right. And now we're threatening to break the 18 and the 40 month. MACD is below its signal line. So these are somewhat discouraging when it comes to the potential for this to really turn and break out. That's what I was hoping for if we got a trigger. We never got a trigger. You see how this stayed below the 18 week all throughout? We've never had a trigger to the upside on the weekly. There's no trade to the upside. We were kind of hoping for that, kind of watching for it, but it never happened. And now with the big red bar and the violence in the selling. Now there is some good news here. We had violence to the downside, but then we had some violence back to the upside. You see the size of these bars? So I think that's a really good sign of decent support here at 170 for this. The problem is that it's caught in a range now, probably between 170 and 175, maybe 180, something like that. Okay, let's look at JBL because I do want to just point this out. Now, this stock is really extended. I think it's too late. It's too early to sell and too late to buy right now. We need another pullback like we had here, 18 week. You see these pullbacks to the 18 week? This is where you're looking for these setups. But I did want to point this out because of the lesson I did. You see this low ADX pattern, and then actually it was forming a low ADX, and then we had the COVID pattern, and it broke out from a low ADX pattern, and then COVID came out, and everything went down. But then this turned right back around. But look at what took place. Really strong momentum condition, and then we get a pullback. So this is the pullback play, all right, after a strong condition to the upside. But then look at what happened on this time frame. During that time, we created a low ADX pattern. Do you see that? And then this was the green bar. That was the breakout bar that got things going. So this is the combination of the two things I was just talking about. Something you definitely want to be on the lookout for. Strong momentum on the high time frame, low ADX condition on the low time frame, and then it kicks off this monster move. You will go back and look through enough charts, you will see this happening over and over and over again. Be on the lookout for it for sure. Okay, AMD, I'm following up from last week. I talked about this last week. I love the way this is setting up. This is what's encouraging about what I'm seeing when I go through all the individual stocks. The cross here was too early, but now we've consolidated back and we're finding support in the form of a pinch play right above the 18 and the 40 month line. Now, is this a trigger one because we're sitting on the zero line and we don't really have low ADX, but we have a good ADX condition. This is out of my course to trigger. There's 4 different trigger methods. I don't consider this a trigger one because we're coming into a declining 18 week. All right. I know we're trying to break through that, but the fact that it's declining, it just doesn't really fit. I want these lines a little bit closer together if we're going to get a trigger one, or at least have the ability to really get through that 18-week line. So what we want to do now is look for a little bit of strength here and then look to play the first higher low, come down and test and turn back to the upside. That's probably what I'd be looking for. I want to clear this 18-week. Okay, YOLO. So I get the question. I understand what's going on. You see this strength here and pullback, and you're saying we're getting a pullback to the 18-week. We got a little pinch developing. It's kind of right at the zero line, not my favorite. But here's what I don't like about this. You see all the volume that went in? It looks like half of it or 3/4 of it came out on this pullback. Do you see that? Now, look at what's going on here. You see the move to the upside, and then we just retrace the whole thing. So here's the breakout point. I don't really want to see a move that retraces 100% of the breakout, right? If it ran up and then held here and started to turn, then I'd say we're holding a pretty strong level. I don't mind coming back to a 618, but to come all the way back down to where it broke out from, it's just sort of a sign of weakness. It kind of confirms what I'm talking about with the volume pattern. So the other thing I would point out is that this rally failed right at the 18-month. Do you see that? So the next time this does this is where I'd be a lot more interested. This should be flattening out and we should be coming up through. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for that to get going again. Okay, I had a question on this pinch play. Now the pinch play has triggered and it's up 2 weeks now. Do you see how we had a pinch play here? This pinched into the signal line. All right, this is another pattern out of my book and my course. So if it's if we have that and we don't have anything else, then it's a little trading play for 2 to 4 bars. In this case, it would be 2 to 4 weeks. But I don't really like that, especially in this situation where we've got a declining 18 months. So I know I'm trading this. So it's a short-term trade if I'm doing this. All right. And that's about it. I would actually prefer if this is above the 0 line and this is above the 18 week, sitting on the 18 week. I think it would be a lot more appealing. Doesn't mean you can't take it as a little trade, but there's not a lot of upside room. So now what we want is for this to actually have a little bit more follow through, a little bit more follow through here, a little bit more strength here, and then you can play it hopefully after this fails here and then consolidates. So I think it's going to take a few months before this is really ready to break through and get through that 18-month line. So I think we'll be patient on that. The Dell looks great, very strong. We're getting this pullback. I'd like to see this because this overran the 18, all right, and the 18 rolled over. Now I kind of want to see this consolidate a little bit more and have these lines come together and maybe form like a double bottom in MACD while this goes lower. And then we could look to maybe play a breakout play that way. You don't have to wait for the high to be broken out, but it should make some kind of an interim peak, pull back, and then do that. That would be kind of like the next entry point. It's a little extended from the 18-week line. I know there's a pinch play developing here, but it doesn't look quite ready to break out and go this second. So that's my read on that. Okay, Netflix. So Netflix is pulling back to the 18-month line. It does have a decent amount of support around 360. You can see it in price somewhere around the 360 level. So something to be on the watch for. The problem I've got is that we don't have a setup. We're below a declining 18-week line. We're below a declining 18-day line. And those two things kind of exit out for me. Now, what's happening on the weekly chart? We're getting closer to MACD support, right? We're getting closer to the 0 line. We do have reverse divergence in place. This is making a higher low and that's making a lower low. So we've got some things to be on the lookout for, but it's just a little too early for me. Let's look at NVIDIA. So a couple of different things taking place here. I got a question on whether this is a parallel lines forming, counter parallel lines, another MACD signal out of my books. No, actually it's out of my course. So it's riding along this 18 and these are going in the opposite direction. So the possibility is that this could fail, take out this swing, maybe next week, take out the low of this bar and trigger a little divergent pinch play or a pinch play off of this, we call it a counter parallel lines. The problem is it's a little too strong. And here's the other thing we need to be on the lookout for. You see how this is making a higher bottom and this is making a lower bottom? That's actually bullish. That's reverse divergence. And look at the distance between green and red, right? I mean, there's 28 in the buyers, 13 in the sellers. It's a 15-point difference after this consolidation that's taken place. So with all the things that are taking place, I think the highest probability is we work off this overbought condition longer. We spend more time consolidating, but it doesn't look like it's ready to break the 400 level. The 400 level is the key to this stock. If you break 400, I think this is in for a much deeper and more painful correction pattern. So be on the lookout for that. Anything above 400, I think this is okay. Okay, so I got the question on Disney. Let's just look at this on a, I did on my other channel, my Invest Like a Pro channel, I did something on the yearly and the quarterly. And so look at this pulling back to the 18 on the yearly, right? But look at the violence, which was pointed out by the guy that asked. Yeah, too violent, way too violent. And that's why this kind of rallied up to the midpoint and failed. This is going to take a lot of time. You notice how we're failing at that big round number at 100. And if we go and even look at the quarterly chart, we've got damage and we're below a declining quarterly line and we're below a declining 18. The first order of business is getting through the 18. If we got some momentum there, then that could make this a little bit more interesting. But I just don't, there's nothing imminent in this at this point. It's got to get going first, and then we could look to play a pullback in it. Okay, Workday. So I like what this is doing because we're getting the pullback towards the 18-month line for the first time. See how it crossed and it never pulled back? Well, now that's taking place. The thing is It did it in a really violent manner with pretty heavy volume, and I think it's going to take some time. I don't think we need to be in a big hurry here. Watch for more consolidation to take place on this. I don't think it's probably a month or two away before this is really ready to go. Okay, really quickly, GBTC. I don't like the monthly pattern, but I do like what's going on the daily. You see how this is holding up really, really well. So I would almost look for a pretty convincing break through this area. You can see it on the daily chart. If we get a breakout, probably on a closing basis, I think it's something I would want to take a pretty hard look at. So something to be on the lookout for here on the grayscale Bitcoin. Thanks for watching the show today. So we've run out of time, but if you have any stock requests, send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Also, my research can be found at rabilstockresearch.com, and my YouTube channel is called Invest Like a Pro. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.